The Digital Omnibus, first we have to say that it's actually a package, piece of regulation that's aiming at harmonizing other regulations. So in Europe, there's many actually omnibus packages. This one is specifically on the digital acquis, meaning that it will impact the regulations that were recently passed, such as the GDPR, of course, but also the other regulations that are impacting the digital industry, i.e. the DSA, the DMA, the Data Act, or even AI regulations. So the idea is to just create like a version of all those packages, which is more like harmonized and consistent and less complex for companies to comply with. The problems of competitiveness that we sometimes see in Europe. So they are trying to trigger innovation through ways of simplifying rules in the EU to make it less complex for companies to comply with the law. And so that's the main ambition. They want to let companies innovate, make it easier for them to comply, while at the same time protecting the digital rights and that were already granted to EU citizens. That's the main goal. But then if you look a bit deeper into what they're trying to achieve, there's many things that you could talk about. But if we focus on our customers' potential interest in this, I think we'd go for three things. So first, they want to fight what we call the consent fatigue, which is that, you know, you've already been on a website, you've seen like a banner, you go on another, you see another banner, and after a while you stop like looking at what they're saying. You just want them to disappear. And that's what the Commission is really after. And so in order to fight consent fatigue, what the EU Commission is doing is, I think we could summarize it it's threefold. So one, they are reshaping the definition of personal information. To do that, they're actually relying on a decision that was reached in 2025, the SRB decision, where personal information is now from a data controller standpoint. What it means in reality is personal information is not just personal information in all circumstances. It really depends on who's actually processing that data. What it means is if you don't have the reasonable means to actually re-identify the person behind the data, then maybe that piece of personal information from your company perspective is not personal information. So that means there's going to be situations where there's going to be one data controller who owns enough data to be able to re-identify a user, and then from their perspective that's going to be personal information. But if they share that information with like another company, one of their data processors for instance, then from that company's perspective, this piece of information may not be personal information just because they don't have like the reasonable means to re-identify the data subject behind this piece of data. So that's one. Second, the EU Commission is trying to simplify or actually to mix provisions from e-privacy and GDPR. What it means in practice is the cookie rules, where normally you should obtain consent to drop a cookie or a tracker on a user's machine. All of a sudden, you don't necessarily have to rely on consent to do that, because you can also rely on all the GDPR provisions regarding legal basis. What it means in practice is that so long as you're dropping a cookie in order to access or store personal information, you can then apply the legal bases that are specified in the GDPR. So you can rely on consent, yes, that's one, but you can also rely on legitimate interest or one of the 6 legal bases that exist in the GDPR. The idea behind this is to make sure that there are like circumstances where dropping a cookie doesn't necessarily imply securing consent. You can rely on another legal basis. And that's another way to fight consent fatigue. Then there's third ambition from the European Commission, and that's the part that is really creating issues at the moment, like people are complaining. That's the browser-based consent, meaning that the consent would be secured at the browser level. so from the Google, Apple, Microsoft of the world, and then would be disseminated and shared with all the websites. So instead of consenting or rejecting cookies on one website, you would do it at the browser level once and for all, which basically would have like a huge impact on the consent fatigue. That's the ambition, but it's not the first time such an idea has been floating around. There's been initiatives that were going in that direction. The last one was called Cookie Pledge, and it wasn't a success in the end. So there's a lot of things to be said. It's from a technical standpoint, it's not even sure whether that's doable. At this point, you would need like a clear standard so that like all companies in the ecosystem would be able to speak the same language between data providers, browsers, third-party websites. They would all have to be able to understand what the user choices were. So that's not an easy task. It's not clear whether that's going to be in the final version of the omnibus, but that's a very efficient way, I would say, to fight consent fatigue. The reason why I think it's going to be a real fight on this last bit is that the European Commission, so aware of the fact that it's going to be difficult to pass this one, created an exemption for media services providers. So they said those guys, they don't have to follow the rules, they don't have to abide by the rules that others have to abide with, and so they will be in a position, despite the fact that the browser is sending a signal saying that the user, for example, rejected the cookies, they won't have to follow that, and they will be able to once again present like a cookie banner to the user. And the reason why they're doing this at the European Commission is that they want to make sure that in a democratic society, you get access to free press, and so you get like journalists working, like getting money from somewhere, and so since the money is not coming from subscriptions anymore, it's coming from actually advertising. So they want to make sure that at least those guys are able to generate revenue so that they can create articles, usually for a good reason, because again, like people, they tend to like democracy, and so that's why the EU Commission is moving in the right direction. The European Commission is actually confessing by doing something like that, by offering such an exemption. They're confessing that they know that this provision will have a huge and a significant economic impact. Otherwise, they wouldn't create that exemption. They're doing it because they know there will be a huge revenue loss, and so they are trying to compensate for it and to safeguard like the media services industry in Europe. Thank you for watching the video. I'm sure there will be other opportunities during the year to speak about the Digital Omnibus. In the meantime, happy Data Privacy Day, everyone, and see you soon in another video.